Okay, well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking to Gladys Williams, who's a qualified chartered company secretary. Gladys has spent several years working in professional services as a company secretary, and she's kindly agreed to answer a few questions about her time in the sector. So, before we sort of kick things off, I thought it's worth just sort of clarifying, what we mean by professional services. So, broadly, we're talking about organisations that provide outsourced company secretarial services to businesses or individuals. So we're talking about the likes of accountancy practices, law firms, corporate services providers, and company secretarial services firms. Okay, so Gladys, just to sort of start things off then, tell me a little bit about your experience to date in professional services.
As you mentioned, it does involve providing company secretarial and corporate governance services to individuals and companies. This ranges from incorporating companies, any changes that are needed, and these would relate to the officers, for example, the directors and secretary, and any changes in share capital that may be needed. It's a broad range of duties and really depends on the type of company that's been incorporated and whatever it is that the client requests.
Indeed, indeed. And in terms of the sorts of firms that you've worked for, give us a sort of an outline. Are we talking about you worked in the likes of accountancy practices and law firms?
I don't want to name names, but okay. It does include a Big Four accountancy firm, a couple of medium-sized ones, and a US legal firm as well. Okay. So it's a broad range, and clients range from one man through to large public companies.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And in terms of sort of how you qualified as a chartered secretary, sort of talk us through your kind of journey.
I had an uncle who was a headmaster and took it upon himself to give us all the talk when we were leaving school as to what we were going to do when we grow up. And my father was an accountant in business for himself. But I found that work a little bit restrictive. I was also interested in law, and he said to me, well, Gladys, why don't you do this ICISA course, which encompasses accountancy, finance, economics, law, and everything in between. And it really appealed to me. And I took the exams full time, straight from taking my A-levels, so I know I'm unique in that respect.
Yeah, and do you feel that was sort of helpful in terms of your career to have the ICISA qualification?
Yes, I do, because it's enabled me, because there are so many aspects you can get involved in. It's enabled me to work in different sectors. And transfer skills over. Generally speaking, most of the work involves working towards deadlines, prioritizing on a daily basis.
Yeah, indeed. We certainly find, having the ICISA qualification, whether that's you've just started the qualification, or you're part qualified, or you're finalist, or indeed qualified, it certainly helps. So I think, in terms of when you're, putting together a CV, it's certainly useful to detail, how far along you are with the course. And indeed, just an intention to qualify really sort of demonstrates, I think, that commitment to the profession. So yeah, I'm certainly with you on that one. And in terms of the sort of work that you've been involved in then, can you give us sort of a few examples of the type of work?
Yes, it ranges, as I said, from incorporating companies through to statutory compliance, where you complete the confirmation statements and file them at Companies House, any changes of directors, shareholders, any queries relating to accounting reference dates, registered office. And there's a wide range. And as I said, the queries come in, and sometimes it's people just wanting to know what needs to be done and the time scale it needed to be done in, before actually taking any action. You find there's quite a lot of advising involved. But with every company, you do need to check their constitution, what used to be known as the memorandum and articles, because not every company is the same. And they are the rules that they agree to be governed by. So you're finding you're moving quickly from one set of rules to another. So it keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's probably quite a difficult question to answer, but I mean, in terms of sort of what a typical day looks like, I mean, you know, I suppose the nature of the COSEC role is so varied, but are there any sort of common elements, I suppose, in a typical day?
And the way I would stress is that you do need to plan and prepare as much as possible, whether that's on an annual, monthly, weekly basis. And there is always usually something that comes to you which is deemed as very urgent by whoever wants it, but isn't necessarily always. But you need to have the soft skills to deal with a lot of people, some who understand, some who don't, and just human beings generally. Because knowing what needs to be done and being able to explain it to people is very important. Yeah,
I mean, that leads me on sort of to my next question quite nicely. I mean, in terms of the sort of challenges of working in professional services, I mean, it sounds as though the softer skills you're saying is it quite a, you know, in addition to sort of technical, you know-how, it's the softer skills you feel that's sort of the real challenge in you know, in company secretarial and perhaps in this sector in particular.
Yes, because you have to realize that when people receive notifications as directors from Companies House, they get very worried. And if they don't understand it, then, you know, they expect you to sort the problem out. And this is despite the fact that you may well have given them some documentation to complete 2 weeks ago and they've done nothing about it. But, you know, you just go with the flow, explain that there are consequences to not having things filed within the specified time limits. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think just going back to the sort of what a typical day is, I mean, I remember my own time working in company secretarial, albeit that was, you know, quite a lot of the time in-house, all the time in-house, in fact. It's all of a sudden you have to just drop everything and deal with urgent work. So it's that ability, I think, to kind of pivot to the different tasks, you know, according to, I suppose, the requirements of the business as a whole, really.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and in terms of sort of what have you enjoyed the most about working in professional services?
I think the variety, because once you've you know you have like your basics, the compliance accounts, the confirmation statements, changes in directors and what have you. I was also quite involved with mentoring students. And that gave us a different aspect to the work because it meant I had to be at the top of my game. But I found it challenging but interesting as well because I could then sort of pass on my knowledge and hopefully stir up that interest in corporate governance and company secretarial work in others. Also, I did some training on various software packages, naming no names, but that too was quite good because you had to sort of think in a different way to your manual systems. And the first one I did install many moons ago, I also had to give a talk to the directors to explain how it worked. And I think that bit was the hardest part, rather than inputting the information.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Certainly the variety. There's I call that the basics, and then anything else that comes in, as I say, usually they're always urgent, is the extras.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd echo that. I mean, I think, you know, certainly from what I'm hearing from candidates is the variety of the work. You know, I suppose that actually applies across, you know, the different sectors, but perhaps especially in professional services, there is such a variety of work. I mean, especially if there's a, you know, a large client base of perhaps different entities and different entity types as well, limited companies, yes. LLPs, PLCs, etc. And, you know, certainly I think as well is the ability to get that best practice experience, which is great because it just, I mean, when I say best practice, what I mean is just sort of getting into the right habits, basically,
Yes.
you know, which is all good for sort of career development and just doing things in the right way. So best for me, the top two, I suppose, would be the ability to sort of gain the best practice and the variety of the work.
Yes, yes, I would agree with that.
In terms of the sort of key skills then, in terms of what you feel are the key skills required to do well in the sector?
I think you have to understand that practically everything is time critical. And you do need to set up your reminder systems, whether that's annually, broken down into monthly, weekly, and daily. And once you can predict what is coming up, you're able to plan better and execute what needs to be done. Get rid of the run-of-the-mill stuff first, depending on how best you work. And then deal with the more complicated areas, especially where outside bodies are concerned, like HMRC, and there's stamp duty involved and that type of thing. Or if you've received a request that something should be notarized, have to sort of think how long that will take and factor that in your timings.
Yeah, indeed. And, you know, for me, I would just add, you know, I think the attention to detail point, we hear this a lot, but I think for me, my top three here would probably be the attention to detail, the commercial approach as well, making sure that you understand what the client's objectives are, and that managing the multiple deadlines point, I think is just, you know, especially key in this professional services sector.
Right, that's right.
Okay, and then just to sort of to sort of wrap things up, I mean, what advice do you think you would give to someone applying for a role in professional services?
I think you have to try and gain the client's trust, and try to get involved not just in the basic compliance, because once you have that trust, sort of thinking back to many years ago, our location of one of the big four firms was such that we would receive requests regarding employment and bringing staff over from the Far East. So once you reach that stage where the client knows they can trust you to do whatever they need within the time limit, they feel happier to actually ask you about other things. And though you might not know the answer, they know that you put them in touch with someone who can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And there's different aspects to it. I mean, you can diversify. There's sometimes meetings that need to be held, and there's minute taking involved with that, and also higher level statutory compliance, which can involve so many different governance aspects, and even if you're not controlling all of it, it's good to have some input, especially regarding shares. That tends to be the main thing that people like to have changed.
Yeah. I mean, I think certainly from a CV development perspective, I think as you quite rightly say, just to diversify your experience and just get involved as much as possible. So then you can get some of those key elements of the higher level work. So, I mean, the sorts of things, as an example, statutory compliance, at the sort of more sort of basic end, you've got the likes of the confirmation statement filing. But I think to get involved in those aspects like capital reductions or, I don't know, corporate restructurings or share buybacks, for instance, you know, those are the sort of things I think that will set you apart in your career. And you know, it's that thing of linking what you've got on your CV to the different job descriptions. So from a sort of a career perspective, I'd certainly recommend keeping an eye on the job descriptions that are out in the market and thinking, right, have I actually gained this experience in my current firm? Is there a way I can get involved in that type of work? If you take something like minute taking, which is kind of, I suppose it's sort of fundamental in many ways to company secretarial. If there's an opportunity to minute one of the committee meetings or one of the board meetings, just get involved. You know, it's such a key skill, and that will really help you know, take your career to the next level and open up more doors sort of in the future as well. So yeah, I think just kind of, you know, get involved is the key point here.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope that thanks so much for your thoughts, Gladyss. Yeah, I hope this has been of some use to, you know, aspiring and experienced company secretaries. You know, do feel free to pop your thoughts in the comment section, and I don't know, if you're keen on perhaps getting involved and being the next interviewee, then do get in touch. So thanks again for watching, and she'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.